sexist. The name of the wind. Patrick Rothfuss. Prologue. A silence of 3 parts. It was night again. The Waystone Inn lay in silence, and it was a silence of 3 parts. The most obvious part was a hollow, echoing quit made by things that were lacking. If there had been a wind, it would have sighed through the trees, set the inn's seen creaking on its hooks, and brushed the silence down the road like trailing autumn leaves. If there had been a crowd, even a handful of men inside the inn, they would have filled the silence with conversation and laughter, the clatter and clamor one expects from a drinking house during the dark hours of night. If there had been music, but no, of course, there was no music. In fact, there were none of these things, and so the silence remained. Inside the Waystone, a part of men huddled at one corner of the bar. They drank with quiet determination, avoiding serious discussion of troubling news. In doing this, they added a small, sudden silence to the larger, hollow one. It made an echo of sorts, a counterpoint. The third silence was not an easy thing to notice. If you listened for an whole, you might begin to feel in the wooden floor underfoot and in the raw, splintering barrels behind the bar. It was in one the weight of the black stone heart that held the head of a long dead fire. It was in the slow back and forth of white lining cloth ribbon along the grain of the bar. And it was in the hands of the man who stood there, polishing a stretch of mahogany that already gleamed in the lamplight. The man had true red hair, red as flame. His eyes were dark and distant, and he moved with the subtle certainty that comes from knowing many things. The Waystone was his, just as the third silence was his. This was appropriate, as it was the greatest silence of the three, wrapping the others inside itself. It was deep and wide as autumn ending. It was heavy as a great river smooth stone. It was the patient, cut-flower sound of a man who is waiting to die. Chapter 1. A place for demons. It was falling night, and the usual crowd has gathered at the Waystone Inn. 5 wasn't much of a crowd, but 5 was as many as the Waystone ever saw these days, times being what they were. Old Cobb was filling his role as storyteller and advice dispensary. The man at the bar sipped their drinks and listened. In the back room, a young innkeeper stood out of sight behind the door, smiling, and he listened to the details of a family story. When he woke, Taborlin the Great found himself locked in a high tower. High tower, from Police Academy, yeah. They had taken his sword and stripped him of his tools. Key, coin, and candle were all gone. But that wasn't even the worst of it, you see. Cobb paused for effect, caused the lamp of the wall were burning blue. Graham, Jake, and Ship nodded to themselves. The three friends, of course, had grown up together, listening to Cobb's stories and ignoring his advice. Cobb peered closely at a newer, more attentive member of his small audience, the Smith Prentice. Do you know what that means, boy? Everyone called the Smith Prentice boy, despite the fact that he was a hand taller than anyone there. Small towns being what they are, he would most likely remain boy until his beard filled out of his blooding someone knows of the matter. The boy gave a slow nod. The Chandrian. That's right, Cobb said approvingly. The Chandrian. Everyone knows that blue fire is one of their sons. Now he was. But how do they find him? The boy interrupted. And why didn't they kill him when they had the chance? Hush, no. You'll get the answer before the end, Jake said. Just let him to tell it. No need for all that, Jake, Graham said. Boys, just serious. Drink your drink. I drank my drink already, Jake grumbled. I need another, but the innkeeper still stinged rats in the back room. He raised his voice and knocked his empty mug wholly on the top of the mahogany bar. Hey, we're thirsty men in here. The innkeeper appeared with 5 bowls of stew and 2 warm round loaves of bread. He pulled more beer for Jake, Sheep, and Old Cobb, moving with an air of boasting efficiency. The story was set aside while the men tended to their dinners. Old Cobb tucked away his bowl of stew with the predatory efficiency of a lifetime bachelor. The others were still blowing steam off their boils when he finished the last of his loaf and returned to his history. Now Taborlin needed to escape, but when he looked around, he said his cell had no door, no windows. All around him was nothing but smooth, hard stone. It was a cell no man had ever escaped. But Taborlin knew the names of all things, and so all things were his to command. He said to the stone, "Break!" and the stone broke. The wall tore like a piece of power, and through that hole Taborlin could see the sky and breathe the sweet spring air. He stepped to the edge, looking down, and without a second thought, he stepped out into the open air. The boy's eyes went wide. He didn't! Cobb nodded seriously. So Taborlin fell, but he did not despair, for he knew the name of the wind, and so the wind obeyed him. He spoke to the wind and his cradle and cursed him. It bore him to the ground as gently as a puff of teeth down, and set him on his feet softly as a mother kiss. And when he got to the ground and felt at his side where they stabled him, he saw that it went hardly a scratch. Now maybe it was just a piece of luck. Cobb tapped the side of his knowledge. Or maybe it has something to do with the amulet he was wearing under his shirt. What amulet? The boy asked, ugly through a mouthful of stew. Old Cobb leaned back on his stool, glad for the chance to elaborate. A few days later, a few days earlier, Taborlin has met a tinker on the road. and even thought Taborlin didn't have much to eat. He shared his dinner with the old man. Right, sensible things to do, Graham said quietly to the boy. Everyone knows. I think he pays for kidneys twice. No, Jay grumbled. Get it right, I think it buys pays kindness twice. The innkeeper spoke up for the first time that night. Actually, you missing more than half, he said, standing in the doorway behind the bar. At increased debt, it always paid. Once the any simple trade, twice for fairly given aid, thrice for any insult made. The man at the bar seemed almost surprised to see Code standing there. They'd been coming to the Waystone every falling night for months, and Code had never interjected anything of his own before. Not that you could expect anything else, really. He'd only been in the town for a year or so. He was still a stranger. The Smith Prentice had lived here since he was 11, and he was still referred to as that Rhenish boy. As if Rhenish were some foreign country and not a town less than 30 miles away. Just something I heard once, Code said to fill the silence, obviously embarrassed. Old cop nodded before he cleared his throat and launched back into the history. Now this amulet was worth a whole bucket of gold nobles, but on account of Taborlin kindness, the tinker sold it to him for nothing but an iron penny, a copper penny, and a silver penny. It was black as a winter night and cold as ice to touch, but so long it was round the neck, Taborlin would be safe from the half of evil things, demons and such. I'd give a good piece for such a thing these days, Shep said darkly. He had drunk most and talked least of the course of the evening. Everyone knew that something bad had happened out on his farm last sanding night. But since they were good friends that knew better than to press him for the details. At least not this early in the evening, not as sober as they were. Huh? Who wouldn't? Old cop said judiciously, taking a long drink. I didn't know the Chandrians were demons, the boy said. I'd heard. They ain't not demons, Jake said firmly. They were the first sick people to refuse daily choice of the path, and he caused them to wander the corners. You tell this story, Jacob Walker? Cobb said sharply. Cause if you are, I'll just let you get on this shit. The two men glared at each other for a long moment. Eventually, Joe looked away, muttering something that could conceivably have been an apology. Cobb turned back to the boy. That is mysterious of the Chandrian, he explained. Where do they come from? Where do they do after they done their bloody deeds? And are they men who sold their souls, demon spirits? No one knows. Cobb shot Jacob profoundly disappointed look. Through every half he claims he knows. The story fell further into bickering at that point about the nature of a Chandrian, the scene that showed their presence to the warrior, and where the amulet would protect Taborlin from bandits or mad dogs or falling off of horse. Things were getting heated when the front door banged open. Pim, 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 pim. Enough for today. Page 5. From 485.